Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. If you don't mind tonight, I'm going to bookend tonight's recording by looking first at some international weather. We're going to finish up with international weather. Got a lot of questions today about South America, so I thought we'd take a quick look at this. Throughout the month of November and early December, we've seen, looking at several different drought indicators, like the one we're looking at here from the CHIRPS data set. We've seen throughout parts of Mato Grosso, into Rondônia, into Mato Grosso do Sul, and even pockets of Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul, that the observations are kind of showing some drier areas. And just thinking about that, I wanted to just make sure that we understand what it kind of means to be drier than normal in South America. Because during this time of year, from now through January to February, there are parts of Brazil's growing areas that it is normal to receive anywhere between 3 to 4 plus inches of rain a week. That would be average. So even when it's drier than normal, they still often get adequate amount of precipitation. It takes a lot to really send this area into deep drought. So to show you how much it is, I just went right down to the Brazilian Meteorological Services website. And this is their last 30 days of total accumulated precipitation. Now it's in millimeters, so a lot of us in the States here, we just need to convert the units over quickly. Just remember, about 25 millimeters is an inch. So if you look up here and you see this 90 to 120 range, this is essentially, about 4 to almost 5 inches of rainfall. So when you look at these colors, this range right in through here is this 3 to 5 inch range. And you notice that even those drier sections in through here, even though there's limited observations, even those drier sections have still received a lot of precipitation. So when we think about how these pockets of dry weather in South America may have been impacting yield, there's likely not been a negative yield impact at this point. So we're just going to keep an eye to see if that does show up. Now from here, let's look at it another way. This is one of my favorite websites, worldagweather.com. I need to rebuild this just so I have my own version of it, but it's a great site. And what you got here is we're looking back over the last 180 days at precipitation. Well, let's flip this back to the last 60 days. There we go. And we're looking at where they grow soybeans in Brazil nationally. And now you notice that they're technically a little bit drier than normal. There is a deficit compared to normal. But over the last 60 days, there's still been a substantial amount of precipitation on average that's been measured. And even though there have been some drier time periods like this one right here back in November, this was at during planting. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. And since then, they've had short duration drier time periods, but overall precipitation's been pretty good. If we go to Mato Grosso, even though you've seen a bit of a deficit starting to show up here, total precipitation for the last 60 days averaged is still about 11 inches. So you see there's quite a bit of the area here that has picked up substantial amount of precipitation. And a lot of that was driven by this drier time period in early November. If you go to Paraná, they're above average. Go to Rio Grande do Sul down in the south, that's an area that has been drier. So if there have been drier regions, we've primarily been able to find them pretty far to the south, the closer we get to Argentina. And that's something where we need to have a discussion about. So looking at the latest root zone soil moisture data from satellite, you do notice that a lot of Brazil's growing areas are okay. The drier parts you see here are in northern and western Mato Grosso. And so we tend to think that south and east of there is where maybe some of the more productive ground is. But coming south of Bolivia into Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina, you can see substantial deficits in this area. And I want to have a quick discussion about Argentina now. So I want to show you some station data. This is the province of Buenos Aires, and I just randomly chose a station just to kind of give you some perspective. Interestingly enough, it's called 9 of July. That's apparently the name of this station. When we look at the temperature pattern, can you see here that as of late, they've had some pretty hot days. So we've talked about the heat that's been there, and there's been several days here that have spiked well above normal. And many of the stations, if I click on a lot of them, do have this kind of precipitation pattern. Very dry coming out of the winter into early spring. And so there is a deficit in this area, a pretty substantial deficit that some of the recent precipitation has not made up for. If we go from there, let's just slide over toward Cordoba, and I'll just pick this location, Pilar. And if we go to that particular spot, again, we can see some of the heat that's been around as of late. And then you notice down here that the overall deficits in precipitation have not made up for some of the longer standing issues that we've been having here. So the drought issues are being seen from satellite. They're now being seen from some of the weather station data. And I'd like to show you a new way to look at this. Now, I think the reason why I got a bunch of questions about what I'm about to share with you tonight, is because earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, Karen Braun, she has, I believe she works for Reuters. I'll have to double check on that. She has a fantastic Twitter account. I recommend following her. She's just great, the stuff that she puts out there, and I really respect her in the field. I believe she tweeted out a graphic that I want to show you where to go get. So I'm going to take you here to one of my favorite sites, and I'll put the link to this in the description in today's video. It is the way that we take together all of the NOAA satellites and reconstruct global data sets. Specifically in this case, I'm going to look at the Vegetation Health Index. So if we look at it, you have your option of looking at the raw values, or you can come in to compare it to last week or last year. I'm interested in the comparison to last year. So what you notice here is that as we look across the globe, there are a few things that kind of stand out. For example, we had that ongoing drought in Southeast Asia. We can see that the very wet conditions, we have better Vegetation Health Index values compared to a year ago. But if you come into South America here and look closely, you'll notice that while we do not tend to trust the Vegetation Health Index values in Brazil simply due to too much cloud contamination, we can trust them more into Argentina, and you can see how low the values are in those particular spots. Now, what I think I saw the tweet, so what she did was she actually went in to different provinces down here in Argentina and showed you something. So let me show you how to get that. I want you to come to the site and go down to the percent drought area by administrative regions. And when you click on that, you'll be taken here. Now, let's go from the United States, which you can choose any country in the world you want. Let's come up to Argentina. Whoops, that was not Argentina. There we go. And you can now choose your locations. We just finished with Cordoba. Let's go back to Cordoba. So I'm going to click on that. I want it to be on Vegetation Health Index, which it is. And let's just make this go back a decade to 2012. And when you click Submit, whoops, maybe I didn't click Submit. Let's try that again. One more time here. Let's go back to, oops, hang on. Let's get this reset. Sorry. Well, sometimes these websites are a bit finicky. Apologize for the extra time. There we go. Argentina. I want to go to Cordoba, Vegetation Health Index, 2012, and I hit enter. Let's click the submit button, and it'll refresh the plot. There we go. This is the one she tweeted. It's a great plot. And what we notice is that when you look at the drought extent and compare it to the last decade, we're currently sitting over here on the graph. And this just illustrates some of the ongoing drought pressure in the area. So again, I apologize I fumbled through that a little bit, but I use it. It's a great resource, and now you've seen me do it, so you can check it out for any location and set your time parameters up here. Now, why this is important, again, we saw the deficits down here. Well, let's go look at NDVI values, raw NDVI values from MODIS. So if we kind of zoom in here and take a look at these areas, let's go to Buenos Aires first. And again, we see well below normal in Buenos Aires, but there has been, as of late, some better precipitation in some places in Buenos Aires province. Over toward Cordoba, they're still at their lowest at the beginning of December in the last 20 years. And here to Santa Fe, we see also the lowest. And we can kind of just keep clicking around. And I'll make sure and link this one in there too so that you have access to it. So the problems here in Argentina, at least I'm not there to observe it myself, but based upon the data I have access to, just do show problems here. As we go forward in the forecast, the wettest conditions over the next 15 days or so seem to be tucked into a pretty narrow corridor in through here, but hit most of Brazil's main growing areas, which is why we see plenty of precipitation for that first crop of soybeans into parts of Brazil. If there's drier risks, it's down in Argentina, and we've seen the chances for some storms coming through this weekend, but they're going to be kind of hit or miss. They're kind of full on into a summer regime. The temperatures down here are quite warm right now as well. Now from here, look at the new long-range data. So this was just released this afternoon. And what does it do? It kind of just keeps the same pattern going, not only through the next 2 weeks, but all the way out to January 15. Now by January 15, we're going to be talking about early harvested soybeans here in Mato Grosso and northern growing areas. But the model's just, once again, kind of painted a bullseye right over the top of Argentina with really dry conditions. So that drought issue, if this verifies, is going to go on. Now in a few moments, I'm going to talk to you about what has to change in order for this to break up. But at this point, we're going to leave it at the model analysis. Okay, I'd like to come back to the states now. We had a new drought monitor released today. And while it did show modest improvement in the drought overall, we still have almost 80% of the land area in the lower 48 in some form of drought, with the greatest being anchored right into this area. Now, this next week of precipitation is going to change this map, so we better talk about that. Because the soil moisture values you see right here are still quite low, especially across much of the Corn Belt, getting into the northern plains. Now, understand that this is soil moisture, but on top of this, we got quite a bit of snow. And we're out looking at some satellite data today just to kind of see that. So if we take it back to the middle of the day, you can actually see the snowpack from Montana through northern South Dakota, Minnesota, and into Wisconsin. And we'll talk more in a moment about the snow that's in the western mountains as well. But as the sun was setting today, it was kind of a couple of neat things I was just paying attention to here. A lot of fog across the country today. And in addition to that, you can see the current cyclone spinning up right here that we're going to keep an eye on. But as I was looking through this, there's something kind of neat right here. Give me a second. Let's do this. Regional. Let's go into here. What was going on? Oh, very cool. This is Missouri River, okay? And there's an interesting cloud feature that kind of lines up with the river and east. See it right there? Very low cloud in that area. But it's quite easy actually to see the snowpack later in the day here. So I don't know, just thought I'd just point that out. But you did see the cyclone to the south of it, and that's where we've got winter weather advisories this evening. And just this afternoon, there was posted a winter storm warning for these northern counties in Iowa. We're going to take a close look at that in a moment. But it's the next system coming into the west that's really just painted the west with risk of strong winds. Very, very wet conditions will be coming into right in through here in parts of Oregon and California. Big snows, they've now increased this to winter storm warning in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And this trough's going to be deep and it's going to be quite cold. So you'll see it emerge at the end of this animation. So let's start off here at 7 o'clock tonight with the high-res NAM. And what we've got is we've got a large ridge down here. So the flow's coming around that ridge like this. The low has ejected and it's going to fade as it tries to move across the country as it loses upper level support. But along the way, it's spreading snow out of Nebraska, over Sioux Falls, across the northern counties of Iowa, southern counties of Minnesota, and then eventually into southern Wisconsin. And I'll show you the snowfall totals in a moment, but south of that through Friday morning, we're going to be seeing rain coming out of Iowa and Missouri into Illinois, and then kind of a band of showers that are stretched from parts of Texas all the way here over toward the Appalachian Mountains. Now that system kind of fizzles out, and we do get another push of rain that comes through right here as we work our way into Saturday morning. And again, this is all just flow around this big subtropical ridge that's sitting in this area. You can too see that there will be some light snow into Minnesota and Wisconsin on Saturday as well. But then the next show is starting in the west as a deep trough digs into the west, and we've got to spend some time looking at what that one's going to do. But first, how about how much snow we're going to get? So if we play this through, Saturday, there's going to be a band in here that's going to pick up 2 to 6 inches of snow, maybe even a bit more in southern Wisconsin. The European model's a bit aggressive on the snowfall totals, but we'll keep an eye out on it. Then, as we saw, some light snow comes into Minnesota and Wisconsin over the weekend, so you can kind of see it adding up here as well. The snowfall totals in the northeast are not that high out of this. But watch, as we then go into next week, there's a monster storm system coming out here, and we've got to talk about when and where this snow is going to be falling. So where's that storm system now? It's right here. Large ridge in Alaska, diving into this trough that at this point has a positive tilt to it. We talked about that in this morning's video. It's leaning to the east. So if you draw a line through the axis, it's like a forward slash. It's leaning to the east. Now remember, this feature you're looking at right here, which will be here on Saturday, okay? Monday, remember, it's just a little tiny feature coming off of Japan. The models have really picked up on what this thing's going to do. And I want to show you where it's going to end up. So here it is. Let's just pick this up on Saturday. So one system's out, the next one's diving in. Now, as that system dives in, it actually gets cut off from the flow. Can you see? It's its own closed system here, highly amplified jet stream pattern, no strong zonal winds to push this across the country. So watch, from Saturday to Tuesday, it only makes it from California to Nebraska. And on the southern side, highly sheared environment, strong jet streak. And what you end up getting with this is kind of some fun jet stream dynamics. There's a ridge, trough, ridge. Now, whenever you see this, we're going to find the trough axis. The main trough axis is right about here. The main ridge axis is right about there. And you go 1/4 wavelength between the two here. That's where your low is going to be. The jet streak runs right in through there. And always on the what we call the left exit side of the jet streak, we have good upper level divergence. Now what this all means is this trough right in through here is going to produce a load that's going to take a long time to cross the country because it's cut off from the flow. In fact, look, 1, 2, 3 big systems are just kind of lined up here because of the way the jet stream just becomes highly amplified and just cuts all 3 of them off. It's a really interesting pattern all the way through the 15th. This is next Thursday. All right. What does this end up doing? I'm going to start first with taking a look at the severe weather side of it. The Storm Prediction Center has been over on top of this all week. They continue to identify on Monday evening the potential for this region over the Red River of the south to have the risk for severe weather. And then as you go into day 6, which would be Tuesday, they're watching the lower Mississippi River Valley for severe weather. To show you this, we got to go over to our multi-model analysis, the GFS on the left versus the European on the right. And again, we're going to pick up on Saturday where the near-term model left off. So here's the scattered showers we expect throughout the day on Saturday. It's in both models. Both models are very well kind of teed up with this system coming out of the Gulf of Alaska, diving into the west. Now let's just play back and forth, Saturday and Sunday. You can see that this particular system is going to deliver a lot of snow into the Cascades, especially right here into parts of like the Klamath Range into the Sierra Nevada. This is going to spread into the Intermountain West. We're going to pack up some snow here just north of the Snake River Valley. And then the low ejects over the Central Rockies. If you just keep a good eye on it here over the European model, and it's in both. I mean, it just spreads just exactly as we planned or saw here from the models out into the Central Plains. Now, as we discussed all week long, this storm system will have a very well-defined dry slot. And that's where you have the convergent winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere coming in and punching a hole in the backside of this. It's in both models, meaning that the farther west you go on the high plains, the greater the risk of staying dry with this system. But it's going to spread. I mean, you can see it in both animations here. Spread quite a bit of snow into parts of western Nebraska, getting into South Dakota, North Dakota, as far back as eastern Montana. And then because it gets cut off, watch, I'm already out to Wednesday, by the way. It just sits there and spins. Thursday and Friday. And we're going to watch late next week what this does up the East Coast. At this point, could be a pretty substantial storm system. So if I can take you back, this is a 7-day system crossing the United States, Saturday to Saturday. We're going to pick it up on Monday. That's when we see the front coming through, creating the severe weather. The heavy rain out ahead of it. We could get storms as far north as Missouri and Illinois. And then the storms press into the southeast, and the storm system just slowly spins its way east, cut off from the main flow. So let's give you some numbers here. I just went ahead and pulled out a full 10-day map from the GFS because it's going to take 7 of those days, Saturday to Saturday, for it to cross the country. This is the GFS, and this is the European. And overall, you can't argue that both models are in pretty good agreement about this system. Total precipitation. I'll leave it on the European so you can have a quick look at this. What's most concerning is the extent of the dry slot back here. And that's an area that we know has been very dry and is going to continue to see that given the trajectory of this system. The Canadian Prairie doesn't get much out of it either. So how much snow in the west? I'm going to go ahead and rely on the operational run just to give us an idea here. So this is now, the big event starts on Friday night to Saturday through Sunday and into Monday. So we just park this out there, I don't know, let's go all the way out to Wednesday. The Klamath Mountains and along the spine of the Rockies, there will be places that do get 3 to 4 feet of snow. In the Cascades, the amounts are lighter given the depth of the trough, but I told you just north of the Snake River Valley, we're going to see snowfall here in that 15 to 18 inch range. And then as this moves out, well, let's go over and look at it from a different perspective here so we can see more of eastern Montana. There's the first system, the weekend flurries, and there it comes. Now, this is an operational run, so we just need to be careful and understand that we're not looking at exact amounts, but we're just trying to identify where that heavy snow band is going to be. And so some of that's going to be in eastern Montana, but it looks like the heaviest snows at this point are going to be in this particular area. Now, just look at it. We'll get updates on this throughout the week and weekend and see a better view of it next time. But can I give you a different perspective on it? I want to take you over to the European model. And what I want to do with this is a couple things. One, I just want to illustrate that over most of the next 10 days, the Pacific jet fails to kind of just come screaming across the Pacific. It's breaking up here, which is why systems are coming down like this into California. Unfortunately, this does mean a bit of a drier pattern for parts of the Pacific Northwest, but wetter in California. Where the jet gets reinvigorated coming off the mountains, you know, if you're sitting under the jet stream, you've got a pretty good chance at keeping some wetter conditions around. But what I want to do is I want to take this back down to a US view. There we go. And let's now look at some probabilities. So let's just start off first with best chances at getting over an inch. And we can see that over the next 10 days, with that big system coming in at the beginning and then ejecting here, we've got a large area that's going to be very wet. in this particular part of the country. And a lot of this is going to be snow in this area. How about going up to 2 inches? There you can see where the wettest places will be outside of what's going to happen along the west coast. To be right in through here. And just because it's good to look at, who's got the best chances of at least 4? It's right here on the coast of Oregon and Washington. And that's how we could get 4 feet of snow here in the Sierra Nevada. Now, since we're talking about snow, let's flip this over to winter probabilities. And first thing I want to do here is how about the chance of getting at least 3 inches? So now we can see who's going to widespread where the snow is going to be all across the northern tier of the United States. Step it up to 6, and we can see the heavier corridor here, and of course throughout the west where the snowfall amounts are almost always larger. What about a foot of snow? And might as well take it up to 18 inches. And the point here is to say how much is coming into the Sierra Nevada, Southern Cascades, but the models are not kind of joking around with how much we could possibly get out of this system. Now, what's a failure point? Remember, we still have to get to Saturday before the trough even gets over the west coast. A lot will change. I promise you it will change between now and then. But that's why we do these videos every day, and the long-range ones in the evening. We'll have several more chances to kind of keep up with this particular system. But if I blow this back out, let's go back to that northern hemisphere view. Let's not look at snow, but let's go back to those winds. Okay. What I really am kind of keying in on is how we can't seem to push the jet stream through this split in the flow that's happening here. And as a result, the week 2 forecast looks a little drier for the northwest. But remember, it comes down south into California and runs pretty far south. That's where we see our best chances of precipitation. Now, just to kind of add to this, I want to show you a different way by which sometimes I supplement these longer range forecasts. Now, at St. Louis University, they have a research group there that produces these analog forecasts. And I look at them supplementally all the time. A couple things I want to show you. The next week, by the way, if you struggle a bit with colors, this is the green and that's the brown. I have to get help with this as well. You know, we're looking at high probability of being wetter than normal here simply due to the pattern we're dealing with right now. But going into week 2, you start to see drier conditions showing up in a few places, but still open flow that's moving. What'll be interesting about the second week is the models are finally starting to let some of that cold air out that's been stored up in the western U.S. and the Canadian prairie through Montana and letting it off to the east. And I want to take a moment to kind of look at when that's going to get there. So starting off on Friday, our temperatures throughout much of the midsection of the country to the east are warm, with the exception of some cooler air still in place on this little backdoor cold front that's sneaking through parts of the Carolinas and the Mid-Atlantic, Now, if we go into Saturday and Sunday, wide open, mild conditions here. But remember, the trough is now fully onshore. And watch from Sunday to Monday. This is when the sector opens up that produces the risk for severe weather here. Going from Monday into Tuesday, the front advances. The severe weather sector now opens up here. And then by the time we get out to next Wednesday, that's when the cold air starts to advance. And the longer range model here, looking out 15 days, shows all that mild air getting kind of pushed out behind this system into week 2. And we're finally starting to see, I think, something that a lot of us thought would happen about 5 days earlier than it did, which is that colder air, which is still staying anchored between Montana and British Columbia compared to normal, making its way across the rest of the country. Now, we got new long-range data to talk about too. There's a lot going on right now. And the first thing I want to talk about is the MJO, because we're seeing some very interesting behavior in the forecast of its phase. It has spent so much time over the last couple of months up here in phases 5, 6, 7, briefly 8, 5, 6, 7, just been doing that. But the newest forecast is keeping it in null space, and some of it's breaking out in the Indian Ocean. Now, the case I've been presenting for a while is if we're going to see the La Niña get past its peak, it's going to have to start with a breaking up of the trade winds, okay? And if we look out there over the next, 15 days, best rising motion seen in this shade kind of sits somewhere in this vicinity, which means that these stronger westerly wind bursts must be given up a little bit. So I can see that by going to the Hofmüller diagram. Now, we still have our normal trade wind surges. Look, see these coming through here? But the stronger westerlies, they're starting to fade a little bit off the Indian Ocean. And the Indian Ocean dipole is actually back toward neutral right now. Now, this is just one of the controlling factors. We have Arctic high latitude blocking. We have what's going on in the North Atlantic, that massive storm system we talked about earlier this week, plus a ridge over Greenland. So there's more to it than just this. But I now agree with, the last couple videos, I've not agreed with the longer range ECMWF. I believe it is now back into the configuration it should be, which is more systems coming into the west via the Gulf of Alaska and ejecting in the mid part of the country. So this is the new forecast for December 20 to Jan 20. And again, it is showing what I had anticipated. Now, could we both still be wrong? Oh, you bet. That's why we stay on top of it every day. But this at least makes sense to me given the flow we're seeing across the Pacific and how it's being influenced by the MJO and the high latitude blocking. On the temperature side of it, that month or so doesn't favor a lot of warmth. If there's a place that's holding out the longest, it's the southeast, where we still have yet to determine the full strength of the southeast ridge. Now, why I'm worried about the strength of the southeast ridge is, if you look at those ocean temperatures, we still have a lot of warm water. In fact, let's pull those up real quick here. Current ocean temperatures, there it is. We still have a lot of warm water sitting right in this area, and that's a part of the negative Pacific decadal oscillation. Now, why we care about that is because whenever the PDO is negative, there tends to be a ridge here and troughs that come in like this with a ridge over the Aleutian Islands. So that's why I'm still questioning how strong this subtropical ridge will be going through the beginning of this winter, given what the PDO is doing. But as we talked about on Monday's report, we still consider the European model's solution for where this La Niña is going to go to be pretty robust, meaning that it is likely reaching its peak now, and between December 15 and Jan 15, we're going to start to see the trade winds break up a bit. And that will be the beginning of the end of this La Niña. Now, I've kind of hitched my horse to this wagon, and I have drawn a line in the sand thinking that I think that the La Niña will not last this winter. I told you I think it'll break up at some point over the next 45 days. The effects of it, well, it may go out kicking and screaming, but that's just my forecast. And if I'm wrong, I'm more than prepared to tell you why I'm wrong once I find out why I'm wrong. But I'm following this pretty closely. So let's now look at the newest data and compare it to the European. So what just came out, I think this was yesterday, is the new NMME forecast. And I just want to show you, let's go out season 3. That's March, April, May. Just like the European, we start to see warmer water here, meaning that the models are still picking up on that La Niña breaking down. If we come back to just the United States and say, show us what's coming up for winter, they still have a very La Niña start to winter. Wetter Northwest, wetter Ohio River Valley, drier risks south. I actually think this is still biased too dry. That's my own assessment of it. I think it's biased too dry. As soon as the trades let go, we could get some subtropical jet going, and that would cure some of this. But I wanted you to compare this January, February, March map to what we already had from the European back on the 6th. I showed it to you on the 6th. And it's very similar, but this is just my detailed map of what I think we're going to be seeing here in terms of jet stream behavior, where the ridges will be, and where there's risks of being drier. I say there's risks, but if we get this subtropical jet going, that's all out the window. Now, given that we just took another look at winter, I told you I'd bookend this with some international stuff. We're quite cold in Europe right now due to all that high latitude blocking. It's also very cold in the southern part of Australia. So they're about to start winter, and they've been very cold across this whole region for much of spring and extremely wet. You can still see the heat that's on in parts of Argentina, although it is expected to fade next week. And this is a 10-day forecast map. But what I'd like to show you here as our last slide is that the 30-day outlook for December 7 to January 7 keeps much of Europe cold. And if we continue to see all that high latitude blocking, this might be something we watch for throughout much of winter. And that could, of course, just impact global energy issues, especially on the demand side of it. All right, that's currently what I'm thinking about. I'll let these thoughts kind of refine themselves as we get more information, and I'll report back to you as soon as tomorrow morning. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.